What's up, everybody? Thralls here once again. I'm Necrotic.
I'm Jammin John.
And we have an album review for you. And one that I didn't know I had on my radar until I saw that they had a new album coming out. I was like, wow, man, I haven't listened to this band in like fucking forever. So we are going to go over the latest offering from VII, number 7. It's another one with Roman numerals. I guess that's kind of a theme this weekend. But yeah, this also came out on the 7th of July on Minus Head Records. This band formed in 1995 in Sacramento, California. I first heard of them, actually kind of an interesting segue, courtesy of Soulfly's second album, Primitive. Their vocalist Grady was on the song Pain along with Chino from the Deftones. And yeah, I got curious about them and I picked up one of their albums, VIN, and I was like, wow, this is not the nu metal I was expecting. This is some vicious, sludgy hardcore.
I forgot about that until just now.
Yeah.
Now that all makes sense. I get it. All right. Yep. Because I remember that's where I heard about them too. It was also on Soulfly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is their 7th album overall. Otherwise, they're not using the Roman numerals right. And I guess to describe this is a mix of sludge metal and hardcore and just dark vibes across the board. This is a super dark, brooding album. I was not expecting this. Like, I know VI's heavy. Like, that is definitely a thing that they do really well. Lots of chugging, lots of bottom-heavy riffs, you know, slow kind of lumbering grooves and, you know, occasionally fast parts. But there's something about this album that is just unrelentingly oppressive. Like, this is all the dark things ever.
This is like every single time you failed ever in your entire life hugging you.
Yeah.
It's not okay, you fucking failure, but here you go.
Just squeezing you until you're nothing but a pile of bones and failure. Yeah, no, that is pretty much the vibe of this album. Now, admittedly, it had been a while since I had listened to this band. In fact, the last one I listened to was one of the albums that Jeff Jaworski was the frontman for when Grady had chose to leave the band after a while. Actually, I think it might have been one of the albums that Chris Fenn from Slipknot, or formerly of Slipknot, was on. But coming back to this, man, I got a dose of kind of what I expected, but with a whole other level of just misery and oppression on it. This album is flat out dark, and honestly, for a hardcore album, hardcore / sludge, whatever you want to call it, man, is there a foreboding atmosphere on here, and probably some of the best use of synths in terms of a hardcore release I've heard here lately.
It almost makes it not hardcore per se. I mean, it's hardcore in the sense that you listen to the riffs and you listen to the pace of everything, and you know the riffs are chuggy and out to get you, and it's got that mean attitude like hardcore has. But then in contrast, the atmosphere hits you and it makes it almost like post-metal.
Yeah. Not the pleasant kind either, like the really dark, foreboding kind, like Neurosis and Cult of Luna. There is, again, just a vibe to this entire album. The opening track, Luna, comes in with isolated drums and just Grady screaming his fucking guts out, nothing else. And then you get this sort of muffled section where everything kind of gets all staticky and you hear this like dirty sounding tremolo riff, and then the song just explodes. There's even some blast beats in this song, and it is absolutely ferocious to the point. But then you start hearing these like synths in the background, and they're not like, I would say, like traditional melodies. They're more or less like swells of atmosphere and ambience, and for the most part they sound haunting and chilling and just sort of have this interesting contrast with how absolutely devastating the guitars are.
It's not necessarily even a melodic synth. I mean, it is. They're definitely hitting notes, but it's more of a drone.
Yeah.
Like, it's not just noise. Like you would hear, like, okay, there's synths for atmosphere. It must be weird noises or wind or shit. No, it's melody, but it's not. But it is. And it sticks around the entire album.
Yeah, actually, every track is accompanied by these synths, and at no point did I think they were too much or too annoying. It's really interesting when it comes down to the production of this album, too, because there's a lot of cool, like, volume swells in here, and that isn't necessarily just with the synths. The guitars sometimes will drop out and be a little bit more muffled occasionally and come back heavier than hell, which the guitar tone on here is almost weaponized. Like, it is so bottom heavy and chuggy. It'll remind you how much you love your Meshuggah album still.
Yeah.
And honestly, I mean, we're listening to Deftones' Diamond Eyes in the background. It's like, yeah, there's a little bit of Steph in there.
I mean, Stephen Carpenter called and he wants some of his bottom heavy riffs back. Actually, I get reminded of the riff in Diamond Eyes almost the entire record. Just, it's that fucking heavy.
But those volume swells also come with these synths. Sometimes they're a little bit more in the background, just something to accompany how absolutely bruising the riffs and the vocals and the drums are. And then sometimes they get pushed way to the front and almost overpower the guitars or blend in with them and creates this wall of atmosphere and, well, surprisingly melody too, because like I would say 90% of this is just flat out heavier than hell, like ridiculously heavy. But you have great moments of melody on here, and it's that sort of like lush post-metal, I mean, I guess you could say like post-sludge metal on this. I don't know.
Maybe.
It's almost kind of its own classification, but songs like Diablito, Wings of Mariposa, Paloma's Blessing, and the absolutely amazing melody at the end of the song No Stars to Guide Me. It's very captivating, it's very lush sounding, but even with how melodic it is, these layers of just dissonance and just heft, and with Grady's almost desperate vocals, man, does it create just such a gray, dark, kind of moody piece. Like, it's just a bleak fucking sounding album.
Yeah, it's not black sounding darkness, but it's very gray. It's very just like unsettling and sad, but like a pleading sad. Like,
yeah, honestly, it's like hanging out in the event horizon of a black hole. Like, we're kind of at that tipping point. But when this album is flat out heavy, man, the breakdowns on here are just mind-numbing. For all future time, dude, there's just disgusting heavy riffs on there, syncopated chugs. And while the riffs are like a little bit more minimalistic, like they're just flat out chugging with like good dissonant melodies here and there, but they add the right amount of like bends and like little slides on them to kind of give them a little bit of extra character.
Sometimes it reminds me of like all the melodic Meshuggah atmosphere moments where it's just like the single plucked notes, and then in songs like Feeding the Soil, it is just flat out fucking gross. Between the atmosphere and the riff, and then in La Ultima Nota, I compared that to a less evil-sounding Primitive Man.
Yeah. Actually, the song almost kind of runs like a funeral dirge. Like, it opens up with lush synths, and then you hear this doomy kind of dirge sort of melody come in. Grady lets out one last giant scream, and then it kind of chugs along for a little bit, drops out, the synths swell up, and you get, well, I mean, I assume what the title is. La Ultima Nota, the ultimate note. It's a heavy one. Big fucking surprise there. Yeah, it's kind of an interesting closure to this album, just in terms of like, yeah, we're going to end on, well, one solid, heavy, droning note.
All the while, I can't help but think what Grady's vocals remind me of, too, especially on this record. It's Tim Williams from Vision of Disorder, mostly off the self-titled album. Like, it just hits like that. Just that labored, like, pleading scream, but he's screaming at you. It's just got that kind of intensity to it.
Yeah, and how they move him around again in the mix. Again, this really awesome production here. I really don't want to undersell it. Like, everything here sounds fucking great. But sometimes, again, they'll move him back in the mix. Even kind of doing like a Chino Moreno kind of like spoken word thing occasionally. I mean, the Deftones nods, I think, are pretty obvious, especially in the beginning of Feeding the Soil. Like, that flat out sounds like the start of a Deftones song that I can't place off the top of my head right now.
Yep. Well, I mean, it's got that kind of atmosphere to it. And these riffs, too, I was not expecting this heavy of riffs. Like, they are beefy fucking chugs. And it's all over. And it's not like they're really intricate by any means. There's not a lot to these riffs, but what they do well and heavy as balls.
When they're not doing, like, flat out, like, hardcore sludge metal chugs, you get some really evil tremolo riffs that pop up in here, like, almost bordering on death metal, like that kind of like apocalyptic riffing that you almost associate with like incantation. But there's also the elements of atmospheric riffing and melodies in here, especially on Paloma's Blessing. There is almost like a shoegazy sort of wall of sound, like a little bit of My Bloody Valentine kind of just crept in, and I don't know, it adds a lot. Like, while this I would say is minimalistic when it comes down to the guitars and maybe like the drums and rhythms itself, like there's some more intricate rhythms occasionally, but a lot of this is just sort of driving. But what they do with all these elements in terms of expanding it, namely with these keys, really makes this album stand out and gives it just a very just personal sort of anguished vibe that it's hard to escape. Like, I tried to picture what a live show would be like with this, and all I could see in my head was a mosh pit full of my worst nightmares. Like, it's just fucking dark as hell. And to a degree, I would even say this kind of ties in with this resurgence of metallic hardcore here lately, like namely bands like Knocked Loose and Jesus Piece.
Yeah.
These two bands, I have a feeling, probably have listened to Willhaven before, because there are some stark similarities, and I know Willhaven has not changed around their sound much because they really don't need to.
Now, as far as negatives are concerned, because we've spent a lot of time smiling and happy about this album, even though it was horribly depressing.
Void of happiness.
I really don't have too many negatives, like, at all. Like, even when I got nitpicky, like, if I really wanted to get nitpicky, I could say in Diablito, where the synths almost overpower the riff, I thought that was kind of odd. But that's about it.
Yeah, there's a couple of moments where sometimes the synths do just push way to the front, but at the same time, I kind of like that because it's a steady swell. Like, Diablito and Feeding the Soil both have like some loud synth sections, but at the same time, I don't know, like there's something kind of crazy and unhinged about this album. Like, I wrote down a mental breakdown with breakdowns. That is also a good descriptor of this album. So I don't know, like the atmosphere might overtake a little bit, but at the same time, the atmosphere is such a huge part of this listen, because I think if you strip out those synths, it'd still be good. It'd still be ridiculously heavy.
But I don't think it would hit as hard.
Yeah. I kind of need that darkness, because it really just makes this album the fucking bleak, oppressive trip that it is.
And the songs were a little short, namely the opening track, Luna. I thought that was incredibly short, considering just as they got going, it ended.
Yeah, there's a couple tracks where I can get that vibe a little bit, especially with the post-metal sort of, vibe that it puts off. You expect longer songs. But at the same time, man, I like this whole album. I really do. Even the Diablito 2, the just synthy interlude that's on it, holy shit, those synths sound good. It's dark, it's ominous, it's kind of like sci-fi horror vibes in there. I like pretty much every single track in this. And yeah, this was a week where I thought we were kind of like, kind of scrounging for stuff to review. And I don't know, sometimes those weeks generally throw out some like weird little kinks, and this is definitely one of them, because this is badass.
So yeah, in the end, no stars to guide you. How about 4.5 of them? Is that enough stars? Does that guide you? I think that would certainly guide me. It guides me into an incredible rating, because this album kicked ass. And I wasn't expecting that. I haven't listened to much Willhaven, and what I had listened to I remember to be heavy, but this whole atmosphere thing that they brought on, it just makes the record, thicker and darker and just, it's gross. I spent the whole time with Sour Lemon Face, and I did not see that coming at all. The riffs are just downright heavy. They're simplistic, and there's not a whole lot going on, but what is going on is simply just heavy. Also, I do like the usage of synths, and I like how it's not just sounds. I like how it's a big droning melody, and it just really brings character to each of these songs, whereas without them I think it would have been a little dry, but it just kind of tied it all together. And again, being hugged by all your failures all at once. You remember going to high school and they were like, you're a fucking failure and you'll never amount to anything, and you spent time hugging yourself. Oh, was that just me? Was that just me? It might have been. I'm sorry, maybe that wasn't you, but if it was, all your failures will hug you. And unlike those failures, this record is a fucking winner. Definitely check it out.
4.5 as well for me. I've listened to this 3 times today, and with each listen, I am more enthralled by it. I know, that was clever, right? Dude, this is just a monster of a listen, and so dark and so foreboding. Again, the synths on here add so much character to these songs. Like, they make them even more oppressive than the riffs and the fucking vocals, and just how just violent this is. This album lives and dies by like emotion. And I really like that. Everything just feels like it's pouring out of this, and it's just radiating negativity. And I totally get it. This is very much like musical catharsis. And again, if you are a big fan of like the current surge of metallic hardcore that's been coming out, this is a band that you need to be familiar with in general. I've been a fan of this band for a while. I just haven't listened to them in a while. I remember really liking WHVM when I got more used to it, because again, I expected new metal. Stupid. But this takes it to a whole other level. They've always been heavy. They've always been kind of like slow and lumbering and had that good sludge metal bite. But man, this album just is so dark and so unrelenting. But at times, like, you're kind of caught in like the lush beauty of some of these songs too, because they still know how to do melody. This is a fantastic listen if you are a big fan of, God, I would say like Knock Loose and Jesus Piece for damn sure, Incendiary, but also bands like Deftones and Cult of Luna and like a little bit of Neurosis in there. Kind of whirl all those things up. Maybe some Mass Worship too, or LLNN, if anyone's heard of that band. These are all bands to check out, and these are all bands that are very comparable to this. I urge you to check this out if you just want a dark, fucking brooding listen with some of the most massive riffs you may hear this year. So, if you enjoyed this review, give it a thumbs up, and if you are new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. We are also on Patreon. If you'd like to help us out there, there's a link down below to thrallsmetal.com, which is currently under construction, but when it resurfaces, our Patreon link is there, and it's also on our channel someplace, but hopefully, by the time it resurfaces, we will be getting closer to showing off some new shirts. And yeah, we're looking forward to showing off this design because it's pretty fucking cool. But yeah, we will do a video showing them off and probably do a giveaway for one of them because we're cool like that. And again, our current giveaway is ended. We hit 15,000 subscribers. Thank you all so much. I will do a announcement video for the winner. I still have to do the whole comment randomizer, but that'll probably happen sometime middle of next week. And yeah, someone's gonna get a stack of 11 CDs and some other shit I'm gonna throw in there just because I'm a kinda nice guy. I said kinda. Okay, fuck off. Anyway, thank you though for all the support. It fucking means the world to us. It's just amazing doing this. Plenty of content coming in the future. Got a whole bunch of irons in the fire because that's kind of how we roll. They just take a little bit of time to fucking get together. But regardless, you all rule, and we will catch you later.